Thanks for inviting me today. Today I'm going to be trying to talk about the role of sports in rehab. And I think, I always think sometimes there can be a wee bit of a misconception about getting people back into sport, and we can get dragged into a lot of the, Paralympic sport, and we can be doing stuff like that. But I think sports for each individual person is going to be a little bit different. I think that's the way to look at it. So if you just think about the benefits of sport, and this isn't necessarily for disabled people, this is just for everyone in the world, there's so much benefits you can get from it, whether it is muscle strengthening, whether it is from a mental health point of view, and whether it's just a general cardio sort of fitness. There's so many different benefits that we can all get from that. But I think the question I kind of want to ask is what does sport mean to you? Because I think sport means different things to different people. So I'm going to pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on Richard since he's right in the front row and he's been doing this. But for you, what does sport mean to you? What do you do sport wise?
I run. It's my stress relief. Running, it just clears my head.
Yeah. So that's running, stress relief, Joey. And I think that's a real big one. And I'm with you on that one. Not necessarily the running side of things. I'm not a big fan of running, but for me, sport means mountain biking. Joey, that's a big thing for me. It's something I did when I was a teenager and I've carried on. And yeah, it's a stress relief for me, Joey, when everything's getting pretty busy. I've got 2 kids, so that's pretty hectic as well. So yeah, being able to do something like that. But at the same time, sport for me sometimes ends up in that as well, and it's in the pub having a couple of pints. So that might not be all the health benefits that go for sport, but from a social point of view, and again, maybe not mental well-being, but from a holistic point of view, I think it's really important because sport integrates people into society. So I mountain bike with a group of people, and this was a Facebook group that I found in the area that I'd moved to. I now have a huge different group of friends that I never had if I wasn't mountain biking. Sport also sometimes means this to me as well, which is going to be injury in sport. So you get different things that can happen to you. So this was me. Very embarrassingly, I was mountain biking with my son at a very simple little bit that we're going round that most of the kids go round, and I don't know what happened, and I managed to face plant on the ground, and yeah, you can see I kind of messed myself up a little bit there. But yeah, I think sport means different things to different people, but overall, sport means this to me, and this is exercise, a group of friends, getting out and being a stress reliever. So my kind of thing is how can we try and impart this on our patients, and what does sport mean for our patients? I quite often try to put myself in our patient's situation, and that's going to be it's a really difficult thing. But if I had a catastrophic injury tomorrow, what would be my goals? And my brain, I don't know in what order, but my brain would go to wife and children. How can I provide for them and look after them and have fun, and get back on my bike? They're probably the 2 first things that would come to my mind. There's probably plenty of other stuff there. There'd be work, there'd be other family commitments and stuff like that. But I think it does that, and I think it really brings a sense of getting back to normality for a lot of people, is getting back to that passion they probably maybe once had before their injury, and they can't always see how they're going to be able to get back to it post-injury. For amputees, weight control is a really big thing. I think anyone that has had patients and amputees, we know that when you fit in, for them to fit inside their leg, if their weight is going up and down, then it can be really, really tricky to make sure they maintain the fit of their leg, which can have a real big knock-on effect on family life or their sort of rehab. I was taught this. I have a patient. He won't mind me saying his name, Mark Ormrod. So he's Mark lost both legs above the knee and an arm. His arm above the elbow, and he's a veteran, right? So really high functioning, and I get talking to him. So I didn't treat him from the right at the start. I treat him now, and we were talking about weight control. And his philosophy is, and bear in mind, he's a Marine, so he's got a certain mindset, is he eats and exercises to fit his legs rather than use the prosthetist to fit the legs around him, which I think is looking at it from a slightly different point of view. He was like, Alan, you just need to make me a good pair of legs that are comfortable, that fit me, and then I'll do the maintenance for them, because I don't want to be coming in to see you every 2 minutes for adjustments in the leg. I've got other stuff to do. I want to be doing this. He, even to the point of, he realised that fairly early on in his rehab that he quit alcohol, because it was the usual thing when these guys were going through sort of Headley Court. They'd be in there for maybe like 3 weeks solid. They'd be working really hard on their rehabilitation, and then they go home for the weekend, meet up with their mates on the beer. And then what would actually happen with amputees like that is you can get lots of water retention, you can swell up. So what he found is actually if he did a bit of a weekend on the beer like that, he came Monday morning, couldn't really get into his legs, it was a wee bit uncomfortable, so he had a day off the legs. And that day sometimes turns into 2 days off the legs, and then you actually put on a little bit of weight, and then you were struggling. So it was this vicious cycle. So I think weight control is a really, really important bit that sport can help with patients. Mental wellbeing, another huge thing. I think a lot of our patients, I mean, if you think about what Holly was saying earlier on with pain and the mental well-being and the mindfulness of stuff like that, I think sport can play a really big role in that. Socialising. When I was writing this presentation, that actually originally said socialising with other disabled people, but obviously I run these things past my wife when I'm doing a presentation, so she was like, not just necessarily going to be socialising with other disabled people, are they, Alan? It's socialising in general. And I think it's really important because I think there's two sides of this when we have patients. We can socialise with other people, which almost makes some of our patients feel quite normal. But it's really important is socialising with other disabled people, because that's that community feel that you get from that. And not everyone's going to be the same. And then new possibilities as well. I've met so many patients over the years that have got into something because of their injury that's happened. A good example of this, I love telling a story to sort of try and make my point of a patient. So there's a guy that I used to treat when I worked in the NHS, and I didn't make him his leg right at the start, but from when I knew him, he was a gym instructor, he was ripped, he was just like a triangle of a man. So he was, I was talking to him and I was asking him about it, and he was a personal trainer, he had his own company, he trained able-bodied people. I was like, oh man, was this really hard to get back to, once you'd had your amputation? He went, no, before my amputation, Alan, he went, I played video games and was overweight. I was like, really? I was like that. And he said it was doing his rehab that got his sort of bug for going to the gym, training and becoming a bit better, which led him down a career and having his own company. So, those are the kind of things that I think, in that sort of part of adversity, you can get some really good bits to come out of it. So I think just trying to think about sport in general, like it's dead easy to think about running blades, and we're going to cover running blades and that in a little minute. But when we say sport, it's just trying to open up to like what different sports are we talking about. There's new sports that our amputee patients can join in on. So up at the top left there, that's one of my patients, Sarah, who's recently joined the England amputee football women's team, and I think it's the first time they've entered the amputee World Cup, and she was over in Colombia last year, so it's just opened up a whole new world to her. Amputees playing wheelchair sports as well as running, hand cycling, gym. There's loads of different things that our patients can do, and I think it's for us to be able to encourage them and signpost them in the right way, as well as be able to provide the right equipment. So if you look at running, good example, Richard, glad you said it. We didn't actually plan that, but that was but running as an able-bodied person, it's low cost. It's what, pick up a pair of trainers for 50 quid. You could, you get some running gear. So it's a low cost to get into. It's accessible because most of us probably know how to run. So if I decided I want to take up running tomorrow, then, I could do that. And it's from those reasons, it's really popular. Lots of people go running and allow, and that allows them to keep fit. When we look at the amputee population, it's actually almost the opposite way around. It's a high cost to get into. It's not cheap to get a running specific leg. It's a skill you need to learn as well, because once somebody's had a catastrophic injury and you give them a prosthetic leg, that's not the end of it. You need to now teach them how to run. And I think it's frightening for quite a lot of amputees as well, because having to learn this new skill and really put themselves out there. So actually, for amputees to get back to running, it's not straightforward. we're going to do a bit of a physics lesson now for everyone, because I thought afternoon shift, everyone wants to learn a little bit about physics, don't they? That's the obvious thing. And it's just to try and sort of show you the point of how much force is going through somebody's limb when they're running. So if you imagine, our feet are perfectly designed for taking weight. The sole of our foot has some nice thick fatty pads. The surface area of that foot is quite large, so it's excellent for taking weight. As soon as somebody's became an amputee, they've no longer got that surface area, and they're having to take weight through a part of the body that wasn't designed to do so, right? So now we get into the physics. If I'm standing here on one leg, I've got my body weight going through that. So let's call it 80 kilograms, probably a little bit more, but let's call it 80 kilograms going through that leg. As soon as we talk about forces when walking, then as soon as I start to walk, because I've got a little bit more inertia going down there, we're now talking that we've maybe got sort of 1.3 to 1.5 times our body weight. So I'm now getting up to over 100 kilos, 120 kilos of sort of force going through. So if it was an amputee, through my socket. If we were to get onto jogging, that becomes 2 or 3 times. So if we're talking 3 times, something like 240 kilos worth of force going through that prosthetic socket. If you get to sprinting, then you can up to 5 times body weight going through there. So these numbers rack up and rack up and rack up, and you're having to actually try and support that through a prosthetic socket and through a part of your body that wasn't designed to do so. We've treated a few long jumpers over the years as well, and they've have this photo here is actually the takeoff board from a long jump, and you can put instrumentation in there to measure the forces of it, and some of those jumps have been measured at 10 times body weight when you're going over there. So you just think about the stresses that are going on are massive. So it's not straightforward. There was another slide here that the video wouldn't work on, unfortunately, so I'm just going to talk around that slide. And what we end up doing with prosthetic legs, because we've got this huge ground reaction force, this force going through their stump, is we want to be able to harness that energy, and this is what these types of blades do. So as they harness the energy, the blade will really deflect and then push back off. But the interesting thing about the blade deflecting is you're actually absorbing energy at that point in time, so you're actually reducing some of those ground reaction forces on the patient. So when we talk about this body weight sort of going through it and the high forces, we can do something to impact this. So I wasn't treating the patient, I was the expert on a case, and it was a guy in his 50s, he was bilateral below knee, he was overweight, and the treating clinician had given him a pair of Challenger feet, which are like sort of sports activity feet. And it was being questioned, like, is this an appropriate prescription for him? So when I assessed the guy, I had all this information in front of me. I was like, I need to ask him about these legs. What's he using it for? And his reasoning, or what he used it for, was he's got 2 grandchildren that he liked to play football with. So he played football with them with his normal walking legs that he'd been provided. And within about 20 minutes, he was getting extra pressure within his sockets, just a little bit of pain, and he would have to kind of stop. When he was tried the Challenger feet, rather than all about giving him the extra energy to run faster, it was actually absorbing the energy quite a lot. So when he was coming in, it was reducing these ground reaction forces. And his 20 minutes went up to somewhere between sort of 45 minutes and an hour. At which point his grandchildren were getting bored. And they were wanting to stop playing football. So he's like, at this point in time, these feet are no longer limiting me, are allowing me to get to the point where my prosthetics aren't limiting me. So it's interesting just looking at this, and I think this is when you look at running feet, it's not all about the Paralympic sprinters. You can really go into these with lots of other things. So when you look at the technology that goes into it, what we've got here is from one of our Paralympic athletes. This is a blade from, I'm going to say, like 2009. So I think that was what the blades kind of looked like. And you can see almost how small it comes out the back. As the years go on, blades have grown, they've got further out the back, and then the last one further there. And the reality of it is the bigger we can make these carbon fibre blades, the more energy we can sort of absorb and return when running, which is quite interesting. However, there's a point that it gets to that it just gets a bit silly. And we've got several patients that can't manage these kind of things because you need to be able to manage those forces. So when you're running, like your knee and your hip need to actually be able to control those forces. So as you're getting sprung back, you're not just getting sprung in the wrong direction. So these are the kind of things that are really sort of, I would say, are for your athletes. These are the blades that are being used for the people at a much higher level. But there's some excellent sort of lower sort of grade blades like the Challenger foot, which we use for a lot of other patients. If we have a quick look here just at this graph, this was just, it was my colleague Richard Naveen that gave me this. I think this was quite interesting to look at, and this is over Paralympics over like a space of 30 years, and it's looking at 100-metre time. So if you look at the blue line at the bottom, that's the time for the 100 metres, which you can see is slowly over the years kind of gone up and down, but generally gone down a little bit. Whereas with amputees, you know, it started at 14.5 seconds, and it's getting down and down and down and down. It's really coming down quite a lot. If you look at this sort of big bit here, that was the advent of carbon fibre into prosthetic legs. So you can see that technology for amputees will make a big difference. You know, so you can imagine whatever year this is, it doesn't actually say in the graph, there's going to have been less amputees able to do sport, or do running, should I say, because they didn't have that energy to absorb, whereas with carbon fibre, you've got that there. Anyway, if I try and go away a little bit from just the running, because it's the easy thing that we can sort of like focus on when it comes to sports prosthetics and sports and amputees, is there's not actually a huge amount of other kit out there that is sport specific. So I was pulling this presentation together and I was asking some colleagues, what other sports things do we have? So we came up with this. We've got a foot here at the side, which fully plantar flexes to allow people to swim. So that's good for like scuba diving or you know, snorkeling. The knee up here is something called a Bartlett tendon knee. It's a knee that's essentially got a big, you know, big rubber springs on it and a mountain bike shock in the back of it to dampen it. That's good for, use it for like cycling, downhill. People use it for skiing. You know, there's a couple of different applications to it. There's these types of feet for climbing. So it's not often, I don't think, an amputee can play to their strengths, but I think climbing's one of them, and you can get a foot that's actually quite small and narrow to get, you know, wedge into a rock. And the picture here is actually of a guy, Hugh Hare, who's a relatively sort of famous amputee. He's the guy who was part of the team who developed the Emperor foot at MIT University. So he became a bilateral amputee. I think it was in a climbing accident. I think it was frostbite that initiated that. But he started playing about with one really narrow little feet, but you can see the length of his legs as well that he's got there. So he started playing about with actually, you know, if I can have a longer leg, I can potentially have a better reach and get to another foothold that able-bodied people wouldn't be able to have. And then here on the sides we've got a ski leg. So there's not huge amounts of like specific things that we can get, like that we need to provide our amputees to get into sport, which says to me, actually we can get most of our amputees into sport with general day-to-day prosthetics. You know, they can get back into, I don't know, wheelchair basketball. They can get back to playing a little bit of football with their friends down the park. So this kind of barrier of like cost isn't necessarily always there. Upper limb, slightly different. There's loads of different little attachments that you can get for sport, and I think that's because we predominantly use our hand to hold on to something. So we're either holding a tennis racket or a golf club or something else. So each of those grips are all slightly different. So this is only a real small amount of stuff that we've got here. So up at the top there, that's something for holding a golf club, and it's got a nice sort of rubber bit to it there, which will swing back as they take the golf swing. I don't play golf, can you tell? It's there. A specific arm for weightlifting. You get different things for like holding fishing rods. It's excellent the amount of things you can get. I started using a company, it's a company called Texas Assisted Devices in America, and they do essentially an attachment for everything. So I had this guy who was a transhumeral and he wanted to get back to pull, so you can attach a pull rest into the bottom and end of his arm. So he's got a pull rest attaches straight into there and he can play his pull. The other thing he wanted to get back to was fishing. So I thought I was ordering a fishing rod attachment like you saw down in that bottom one there. Came from America, but 6 weeks later, I got a box that was probably from about here to that wall. We opened it up, and I'd ordered him a fishing rod, not a fishing rod attachment. But this fishing rod had been altered, and it clicked straight into his arm. So there's so many different things when it comes to the upper limb amputee. I think we already saw a picture of something like this earlier on today, and that's an arm for cycling that's got a shock in it. This guy here, one of my patients who we have a specific arm that comes down, and it's onto just a little nodule that comes out onto his bars, and his arm clips over that. He was an interesting case because normally if we get somebody coming through, we say, right, we'll get your walking leg first or your functional arm first. We'll look at those kind of things, and then we'll start to look at sport. And he came in, and he went, no, Alan, I need to get back on my bike. And I got talking to him a little bit more because I'm into bikes myself. This guy had 16 bikes in his garage. And he was like, no, I need to get back on my bike. This is my coping mechanism, and this will do it. And sure enough, we got him like a trial arm, got him back on his bike, and his mental health took a real uplift, and he engaged in rehab a lot better. And it was the right thing to do for that patient at that point in time. So if we look at they're the kind of things that we've got that are what I'd say off the shelf, things that we can go and buy. A lot of prosthetics. There's a lot of skill in prosthetics, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of flicking through a catalogue as well and finding the right part for that patient, and there's skill in that. When we look at this, there's other custom-made things you can get. So this is a patient of mine who was really into cycling. He competed in para-triathlon as well as some different road cycling events. So what we've done here is we've just made a custom-made leg which goes directly from the socket down onto the cleat. And as you can see there, we've made it relatively aerodynamic to try and give him a bit of an advantage on there. The video you've got going on there, and this is where the technology sort of meets something that's maybe a little bit crude. What he's actually going on there is that balsa wood that's stuck to his leg that we were trying to work out where the position of the cleat is going to be. And then what we end up doing is shaping that balsa wood down into something that's really, really narrow and aerodynamic, and then adding a layer of carbon fibre onto it. So when it gets this kind of stuff, like having a custom-made device has made a massive difference to what he can achieve. However, if it was another BK amputee who just wanted to get back on their bikes with a kid, you don't need a special leg necessarily for that. You need a leg that you can potentially bend the knee far enough so as that you can cycle a bike, and that quite often is a leg maybe with a pinlock liner in it. So if you've got a pinlock liner in a leg, then it allows a little bit more movement in the knee because you don't wear a knee sleeve, and then that patient can cycle a bike. Quite handy because I quite often provide pinlock liners for somebody for their water activity leg because it's nice and easy to get on and off. Doubles up as their cycling leg quite nicely. I'll just go on to the next one. This was another interesting custom-made leg that we did. So this is a patient of ours at Proactive, Steph Reed. Steph's a Paralympian long jumper, so we've treated her for many years through her athletics career. But once she'd finished her athletics career, she decided to do lots of other stuff on TV. So she's presented on Channel 4. She has done Celebrity MasterChef, and then we got a phone call saying, I've signed up for Dancing on Ice. I was like, great, cool. Do you ice skate, Steph? Nope. I was like, have you ever ice skated? Nope. So we had to sort of, so we started work with her. So originally what she did was she got a just normal ice skating boot, put it on her everyday leg, and started going on the ice. But what the instructor, and this is one of the fascinating things when you work with patients that are getting into a sport, is you now need to learn their sport to understand it, to be able to problem solve it. So what her sort of coach on run-ups was telling her, when you're ice skating, you're never just going straight forward, you're always on the edge of the skate. You need to know where you are on the edge of it. You're on the inside edge or you're on the outside edge. So when she had her the ice skate that was on her prosthetic foot, there was just a bit of wiggle room in it. It just moved about. The foot shells on these sort of prosthetic feet move about a little bit. The boot was there. There was just an extra bit of movement. So yeah, we came up with the idea of let's just take a prosthetic foot and take the blade off of the ice skate and bolt it straight to that. And it just meant that she then had that real, she could know if she was on whatever edge of the skate she was on. interestingly, ended up doing quite good on the TV show. Didn't win it, but she has developed a passion for ice skating and ice skates and competes now. And that must have been about 6 or 7 years ago. She did the TV show. So again, that kind of sport. I think she had a bit of a hole because she'd done athletics for so long, retired, didn't have her sport, was filling it with a lot of other TV appearances and different things like that until she found ice skating. The other bit is interesting. We ended up actually having to put a layer of foil inside her socket to try and insulate it, because normally we have amputees telling us that they are far too hot in their socket. She's actually got Raynaud's disease in her fingers as well, so she's got a sort of compromised blood flow. So when she was on the ice and she was on somewhere it was actually quite cold, this really flared up. So yeah, it was interesting challenges. Other bespoke sort of sporting things that we've done. So a couple of years, 2 years ago now, we were approached by the para canoe team for British Athletics, and they got quite a successful team. They got quite a lot of medals in Paris. Actually, this is Hope, one of the girls that we treated, and she got a silver medal. But this wasn't to necessarily make a prosthetic leg. This was to see if she could transfer the power when she's rowing more efficiently. Because essentially all she was doing was sitting in the seat, strapped herself in, strapped her stump to the boat with a couple of straps, bit of Velcro, and that's how she was trying to transfer the power. Whereas what we ended up doing was making her a custom-made socket that bolted to the boat and just allowed her to do that. And that took her times just marginally down. And when you look at sort of high-end sport, it's all about marginal gains. So when she came back, she just missed out on the gold, which was sort of unfortunate. But it was definitely the difference between like no medal, bronze, or silver for her. So yeah, that was a really interesting one to do. And as a bit of a side note, I think this whole, like, I've worked with some Paralympic athletes over the years, and this marginal gains thing comes up so often. It's, anything they're training for, it's, changing their team, doing this thing. And for me, it was fascinating to see, trying to make these slight differences. So, for instance, we were making somebody their sprinting leg. If we could come up with a different layup for the carbon fibre that saved that leg 100 grams, that could be the marginal gain of first or second in the 100-metre sprint. So for me, it's something that I've kind of taken on to everything I do in prosthetics. Why should it just be for sort of the high-end athletes? If we can make something just a little bit better, then could just make that marginal gain that they could walk an extra 5% that day, or even an extra 2%. I wanted to finish. I've still got a bit to go, but I wanted to sort of do a couple of sort of almost case studies. So this is a patient of mine who, she's 10 years old now. I've treated her since she was, I think 2 years old, meningitis, just doesn't really know any different. She's been an amputee almost since she can remember. And my question is, has it held her back? So when we look at her legs, she has her everyday leg that she uses for walking around that has a bit of a cover on it. This is her water activity leg. Because she's quite short, we can't get a waterproof knee joint in there. So this is just a locked, leg, which we can make look quite cool. And then she's also got a running leg. So that's her legs that she uses. And these are the kind of things that she does. So if we play that first video, just on the left-hand side, no, that one, So, again, this is just her playing golf. If you can, I've asked them to turn the sound off in the videos because some of them are quite loud. But essentially, Dad's really into golf, and he just desperately wants one of his children to get into playing golf. She doesn't need a special leg for doing that. But if you have a look at it at the end of it, the smile on her face when she manages to hit this golf ball, like you can see the concentration, misses it. And this is kind of like my golfing as well, but yeah. But yeah, the smile on her face at the end there of just doing that. Like for me, that's sport, that's that kind of thing, that sort of sense of achievement. Cycling a bike, no different from anything else. Again, when the sound's on this, you hear Dad saying, make sure you don't crash into my car. But that's her learning to ride a bike. And bear in mind, she's an above-knee amputee as well, so that's actually quite difficult to do. So maybe she's a couple of years older than other children would be, but she still does it, and she gets about and does these things. Just move on to the next slide. Yeah, on holiday, paddle boarding, again, that's just her waterproof leg, that we've got. So it enables her to get in and out the sea, play about on the sand, do all these kind of things. If we go to the next one here, if you look at the video on the left-hand side, she's really into swimming, absolutely loves swimming, doesn't use a leg. She's got a water activity leg, she's got a waterproof leg, but it's kind of useless for her for swimming because it almost it drags her down, it holds her back. So, you don't always need a bit of kit to do that. Middle video, again, I think they were at a climbing wall when they were on holiday, gets her to do that. And then this one at the side was my favourite one. I got a phone call from our mum. And again, normally our mum's brilliant, just lets her get on with stuff, just pushes her into it, let's see what happens. She went, right, Lizzie's been invited to a roller skating party. How do we do this? And I just suddenly thought, I've not had a patient that's roller skated. I've never came across this at any point in time. And what we ended up doing was I was like, well, the risk is her knee bends and she falls over. I was like, stick it in her waterproof leg because the knee doesn't bend and we'll see it. So if you have a look at this video, she's getting on quite well there. And I think if the video will look back again, but at the start of it, it's her friend that's been held up by the parents, yeah? And Lizzie's off, doing that. And that's sort of personality from it. Because of her meningitis, she has had to have quite a lot of operations over the years and stuff like that to be able to, because there's been irregular bone growth. So this video here was her sports day, and she'd actually not been able to compete in sports day for the last 2 years, and this was her almost just getting back to doing that. And again, because there's no video in here because mum's kind of screaming in the background, it's a bit off-putting, but you can hear the rest of the school going, "Go Lizzie, whoa!" And they're just really getting behind her because it's nice to see her getting back into that. And she's actually recently gone through another episode recently where we had to have, so our sound side has been affected and we had to put I say we, it's not me, there's other surgeons that do this, but I had to put a frame on her leg to increase the bone growth, get the ankle into a different position, which left her in a wheelchair. With a frame on, she's not been able to go swimming. All these kind of activities have essentially just been taken away from her for 9 or 10 months. And it's had a massive impact on just family life and everything like that. The happy bit about that is the frame's off. She's doing really well. Tomorrow I'm fitting her sports leg. She's already got her water activity leg and she's getting back to all those kind of things. But it's amazing, we talk about sport. For me, that when this slide came up, it was like sport or normality. I think it is just, it's the thing that we should be encouraging people to get back to or just give them the opportunity to do so. So on the other side of this, if I look at like the Paralympic side of things, so I don't know if people have came across Richard Whitehead, an amputee that I treat currently. Richard he's been involved in different sports, started off with swimming, got into, his passion was long distance running, realised that long distance running was not a Paralympic event, so yeah, I'll just change from marathon running to 200 metres, won a couple of golds in that. He's actually retired, interestingly, from the track running recently, but he's back into the long distance running. So he holds the world record for a bilateral amputee for a marathon of 2 hours 41 minutes. It's mad. He's got a goal of 2 hours 35. That's his goal, and he's doing 20 marathons this year and trying to build up to that. Bear in mind, this guy's pushing 50. But it just shows, I think it's that kind of thing with the right determination. It's amazing. It's amazing what can happen. So yeah, lots of achievements, interesting guy. But for me, what I really like about Richard is he's always talked about legacy, the legacy of sport. So we had it with London 2012. What's the legacy going to be? What are we going to be able to do with that? So Richard actually set up his own foundation, which is the Richard Whitehead Foundation, which probably came across it. They do quite a lot of different events. They do one in the summer, which is a 5K run with Rich that they invite lots of people around to. But his idea is trying to use sport to empower people. It's not about getting everyone into sport. It's about empowering them. It's kind of like what Holly was saying earlier on with our charity Stride Forward. They've got some really, really similar, lots of similarities between them. So what they end up doing is they sort of almost sponsor a couple of amputees throughout the year and provide them with limbs. So these are patients that haven't managed to go through maybe a litigation process, maybe have been struggling in the NHS. So these beneficiaries can come through privately and get their legs. So when this first started, it was always like, let's get them a blade and let's get them running. Actually, recently, one of the patients that we saw last year really wasn't ready for running. So we talked to the foundation and said, like, could we just give her like a more active leg, to allow her to get a little bit, maybe get to the gym. And then when she got to the gym, we realised that, okay, that's getting more active, but her other leg's really knackered and she needs an AFO on that side. So luckily they came back and did it's this whole interesting thing of, using that little bit of sport to try and get people almost back into society a certain amount. There's loads of charities and foundations and stuff out there. I've probably missed loads of them off there, but it's something that we can all do for our patients. It's not about providing them a sports leg and getting it written into their claim and making sure that they've got the funding for that. It's more than that. It's pushing them in the right direction. It's either getting them back to something they were passionate about before their accident, or sometimes you come across patients and you talk to them like, oh, what did you do beforehand? Not much. I'm not really that. But as an amputee, you need to keep yourself really fit and healthy. You, as an amputee, you use more energy when you're walking. You use more energy day to day. So the fitter, the stronger you can be, the better you're going to function in day-to-day life. And I think sport's a big part of that. So I've found it really fun over the years of almost finding people that new passion and that new sport to get into. And these kind of things are excellent. Limper hold a couple of events throughout the year. They've got ones coming up during the summer, which are almost like taster events for amputees to go on. Last year, I went with a couple of bikes. So it was me, Peter from Steps Prosthetics, and another person from OpCare. And we just had a tent with about 4 or 5 different bikes, different sizes. We had a couple of e-bikes there. And the amount of patients that day that said, I've never ridden a bike since I had my amputation. And the smiles on their faces were brilliant. In conclusion, and this is essentially my slide from right at the very start of it, it's about getting people back to that normality. We can help with our weight control. It's brilliant for mental health being. It's great for socialising. And I think the new possibilities bit is a big one. And the next speaker, Rich, is going to be able to talk about the new possibilities that he's come across, which is quite good. And then last slide, just a real plug, because I'm up here anyway, is Proactive are opening a Manchester clinic fairly soon. So so that'll be quite good. So yeah, hopefully be up here and see some more of you over the time. That's me.
Thank you.